Well, ladies and gentlemen, many of you know that here in Orange County, I am only the fourth chairman of the Republican Party in 40 years. Other counties have had some turnover, some instability, but Orange County has had an incredible legacy of leadership. Whether it's our chairwoman emeritus, Lois Lundberg, sitting right at my table, everybody recognize? She mentored Tom Fuentes. Tom Fuentes was chairman for 19 years. TJ is here tonight and his family, serving as our second vice chairman. That's a legacy of leadership. But I tell you, when you sit in my chair, you understand that you are actually sitting on the shoulders of others before you. And ladies and gentlemen, I want to bring before you tonight our chairman emeritus, my predecessor, who served us for 11 years, the person who made sure we're the only county party in the entire state to have a permanent headquarters, the person who engineered our breaking of the 2/3 majority in 2014, the Honorable Scott Baugh.
Well, thank you, Chairman Whitaker. It's great to be before you again without having to do all the work. You do a great job here. It's my honor to introduce our keynote speaker tonight, Devin Nunes. He lives the American dream. He's born in Tulare County. Does anybody know where Tulare County is? All right, you got a little work to do before that statewide run, Devin. But he's born in Tulare County to Portuguese immigrants. On a farm. He started a cattle business when he was a teenager. He took those profits and started a harvesting business and took those profits and bought his own farm. And that is an American success story. He lives the American dream. In 2002, he was elected to the United States Congress, where he has served with distinction ever since then. Most recently, his colleagues selected him as the chairman of the Select Committee on Intelligence. That's a big job, a big role. And as a member of that committee, he has led many investigations on issues that we care about today, issues that are affecting us today, issues that are affecting the administration today. We're in the midst of very sobering times where intelligence gathering and monitoring of private communications have been abused. There seem to be daily leaks from our own government that are designed to disrupt and to destroy those who are fighting for freedom. Many in the deep state want the Trump administration to fail. We have a very serious challenge, and we have to ask, who is policing the police? We are fortunate enough to have Congressman Nunes as a leader in protecting our liberties from improper unmasking and the leaking of information designed to compromise political enemies. We have in Congressman Nunes a friend who is second to none in honor and integrity and irrevocably committed to protecting our liberties. He, along with our great chairman, Fred Whitaker, will be discussing these items tonight behind me. Would you please welcome to the stage Congressman Devin Nunes and Chairman Fred Whitaker.
Could we have the hotel staff remove the podium, please? We're looking for the staff to remove the podium. Otherwise, we'll stand. So, Devin, thank you for being with us here tonight. One of the things that I think concerns all of us, and tonight we had more security at this event than we've ever had. Dave Harrington, sheriffs get it done. Thank you, sir. And that was all driven by the attack on our fellow colleagues, our Republican colleagues in your House, and most notably Steve Scalise. Do you anticipate additional security for our elected officials, and how do we balance that with having access to our government?
Well, first of all, thank you. Thank you, all of you, for being here. Thank you for the invitation, Chairman, and Scott, of course, thank you for that great introduction. Because of all of you here, the reason that we're going to get Dana Rohrabacher, Darrell Issa, Mimi Walters, and Ed Royce back to Congress, but thank you for letting me in their backyard. Chairman, let me just tell you that this is, you could almost see this coming. You could almost see this coming, what happened last week, because the level of civil discourse in this country has reached a point that I've never seen in my time in office. And I think finally what manifested itself after the election is that you finally had the curtains came down from the relationship that the Democratic Party and the extreme left have with the media, the universities, Hollywood, and we can go on and on and on. And those curtains have been drawn, and what you're seeing is you're seeing a political party not willing to accept what happened in the last election. So when you have this happening, and I always say that I want to be fair to the media, but 90% of them are extreme left. 5% of them are right. And 5%, I think, are legitimate journalists. And I'm sure the ones that are here tonight are the 5% that are legitimate.
I don't know, the LA Times is in the background.
Well, let me say, I have a funny LA Times story, actually. I don't know if they are here. But you want to tell the LA Times story?
LA Times story would be great.
Since they're here.
That's why I mentioned it.
So I was speaking at a similar event a few months ago, and all the college kids were Facebook Living it. So it was broadcast out on Facebook, just like I'm sure somebody here is doing tonight, right over here. And so after about 2 months, we get a call from the LA Times, and they say, "We have secret video of you at a private Republican event." Okay, you mean the one that the college Republicans Facebook Live, that secret tape? So they run stories like this that are so phony and so fake. I mean, it's become ridiculous. I mean, every night there's a news story that runs that is essentially has something in common. It's anti-Trump, anti-Republican, and promotes this nonsense that you're seeing with protesters everywhere. And they continue to promote it, which continues to promote violence. And you've seen the latest fiasco with cutting off Donald Trump's head, to attacking him on stage, or having Julius Caesar play look like it's him on stage. So it didn't surprise me, quite frankly, but hopefully it's a warning sign, and hopefully the media will get back to at least pretending to actually do some real investigative work. But this is going to be, if this doesn't stop, it's going to continue to get worse. So, everywhere that I go now, and a lot of my colleagues, we have to take these crazy precautions where we have to have thank you for the police and the sheriff and everybody that are here tonight. If we could give them but just remember, this all comes with a cost, right? All the police and sheriffs that are here tonight and that are protecting us, it's not just me, but they're protecting you in the audience here. But somebody out here in Orange County is not being protected because they have to be here. And that's too bad. We shouldn't have that. I bet 5 years ago at this event, I bet you didn't have to have the police present. So I think that's where we're headed from here.
Thank you. As the chairman of the House Select Committee on Intelligence, Chairman Baugh talked about how you recently subpoenaed 3 different members of the Obama administration over the highly political unmasking of individuals, U.S. citizens. And I'd like you to chat a little bit about that, because all of us want to be safe. All of us want to know if there is a traitor among us acting against the interest of our country. But we also fought a revolution to not have the government into everything that we do. How do we protect our civil liberties when there are people in power randomly unmasking people's identities?
So what? So we have intelligence services in this country that do a very, very good job protecting our citizens, all of us. And you know, with the development of computers and you know, cables being laid all across the ocean and satellites and everything else, there's so many communications going on today that it's become very easy for foreign governments and others to capture what we're talking about. So we have protections in place, as we want to be able to capture what our foreign enemies are up to. But we have rules in this country that if an American is picked up in one of those phone calls, that the name is masked, so that no one for either political party can actually determine what American was talking to who. Unless, of course, there's some criminal behavior, which then there's a process that they go through. It's given over to the FBI. FBI goes and gets a warrant, and they unmask that American, and then the proper steps are taken to enforce the law. So one of the things that was quite obvious, I think, to any of us is that you were seeing bits and pieces of intelligence leak out in the Washington Post and the New York Times, drip by drip by drip by drip. So one of the things that I decided to do, I said, okay, there's something going on here, and it's a guy who oversees this. And what we found from a couple whistleblowers who are great Americans who came and gave me very specific information about people within the Obama administration that were unmasking names. Now, what's interesting about this is we started to figure this out. We were able to figure out that it looks like, to me, in the early stage from our subpoenas that we issued, which was subpoenaed the information on what these three Obama administration figures were doing, who they were unmasking, or not necessarily who they were unmasking, but how often they were unmasking. It appears to be more serious than even I thought, and I thought it was bad from the beginning. So there'll be more to say about this at a later date, but I just hope that the same scrutiny by law enforcement in this country will be put on the people who did this unmasking and leaking to the press as the same scrutiny that Donald Trump has been faced for supposedly colluding with the Russians.
Absolutely. I mean, on this Russian thing, it seems to be such a distraction because even the FBI has said that there's no evidence of collusion. And yet we hear the drumbeat over and over and over again. And to me, it's taking away from the other things that the House Intelligence Committee should be doing. So in that vein, where is our intelligence these days with respect to the rogue nations, say Iran and Korea? And what are our intelligence services and the military going to do about the problem?
Well, look, there's no question that what this last administration did gave our intelligence services a black eye. And you know, one of the things, you know, how democracies fail and how governments fall, when dictatorships take over, what's the first thing that they do? They take over the intelligence services. And you know, that's what's happening here is I see that people who went out the door collected a bunch of information and have leaked it, and then other people continue to leak within the bureaucracies of our intelligence services. So to answer your question on the Russia front first, is that over a year ago, I was the guy who went out and said our biggest intelligence failure since 9/11 was our failure to understand Putin's plans and intentions. I warned the Obama administration. I warned our intelligence agencies. And what happened? The major newspapers in this country ignored it. Now, you have the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee coming out saying this is the biggest failure since 9/11, and nothing is done. So after the election, when all of a sudden everybody saw Russia around every corner, it's like neo-McCarthyism now in Washington. Everybody's a Russian. Everybody's a Putin puppet. I said, well, hey, welcome to the program. It's about time you guys are listening to me. Let's go find some Russians. So we looked, and we looked, and we looked, and I was watching as intelligence was leaking out that was basically wrong. I said, okay, I don't think there's any collusion here. And what happened to me? All the major papers in the country did a total character assassination on me. Why? Because I was telling the truth, that there was never any collusion between Donald Trump and the Russians. And we have wasted, so getting to make the final point to answer your question, Donald Trump and his agenda has stumbled out of the gate because you have the opposing political party who developed a narrative, never let it go, continuing to this day, to where now we have this special counsel who, if you believe the leaks, are not even looking at Russia collusion anymore. So, I have to ask myself, was this really an investigation in search of a crime? And I will tell you, if that's what it ends up being, there will be a huge, huge division in this country.
With respect to the issues that we should be looking at, instead of looking at the distraction of Russia, I'm concerned with Iran and Korea. What do you see as the chairman of House Select Intelligence on the horizon with those two nations, and what can we do about it?
Well, I call both of those nations rogue nations. So I don't see them as the biggest threat, but I see them at the top of the list because they're so unpredictable on what they're willing to do. So Iran continues to be the largest state sponsor of terrorism around the globe. Now remember, these are the people, this is the regime that the Obama administration made a deal with, knowing that they were the #1 sponsor of terrorism around the globe. So what we're concerned about now as it relates to Iran is with the situation in Iraq and Syria, it's going to be very easy for the Iranians to build a logistical network across Iraq, across Syria, into Lebanon, where it's going to be easier to get money, weapons, and other types of logistical capabilities in the hands of bad guys. So I think currently that's my biggest concern, is what happens in the Iraq-Syria theater, allowing that land bridge to be developed. With North Korea, this has long been a problem for this country. We have spent millions and millions of dollars every year protecting South Korea from the north. The danger we have here is not that we couldn't easily win some type of conflict with North Korea. That wouldn't be a problem. The challenge is what happens in those days, possibly weeks, that it would take to take out the North Korean arsenal, as you would have millions and millions killed in South Korea. And that's the danger. That's the challenge that we're having to deal with. There is how do you change this government? How do you reel in a rogue nation like North Korea without millions of people being killed before that? I don't think sending Dennis Rodman is probably going to work.
Well,
although that might have been the plan of the last administration, I'm not sure.
Well, speaking of Dennis Rodman and the North Koreans, they actually apparently didn't like a movie and hacked Sony a couple of years ago. And that started kind of our fascination in this country with cybersecurity. And it really does appear that many foreign nations are trying to hack our businesses, our infrastructure, and our government. During the Obama administration, several times the White House and the Pentagon were hacked. What should we be doing about cybersecurity?
Well, the biggest thing to remember about the cybersecurity issue is this, that it's when we catch them, that means they're not very good at what they're doing. So what I continue to worry about is that there are really bad actors out there that we know have tremendous capability that we are not catching. So in the case of North Korea, we caught them. In the case of Russia, just to bring that up again, we caught them trying to mess with some of our equipment here in the United States, and looking at all the things that they did that's now public now with the DNC, hacking into the DNC. Look, I would be shocked if the Chinese were not on those networks, but we have not been able to catch them yet, as that I know of. But I still look at our longest long-term strategic problem, big picture, is going to be with China, and it's unfortunate, but they are a dictatorship run by one party and they are slowly and methodically putting out a global footprint that ultimately I think is going to be a problem for the United States and our allies.
Thank you. On domestic front, the Obamacare repeal was the #1 issue for Republicans really since 2010. The Affordable or the American Health Care Act has passed the House. It's now into the Senate. What needs to be done to make sure that we can get this done in the first year of the administration and get on to tax reform?
Senate needs to vote. The Senate needs to vote on this bill. I know they're getting close. I know they have some improvements that they want to make and send it back over. But so everyone knows, we only have 52 Republicans in the Senate. So that means we can only lose 2, and that would be with the Vice President breaking the tie. And I believe that they are getting close. From everything that I'm seeing, is that with or without the votes, I think that we're going to have a vote here before July 4th. And if it passes, great. If it doesn't pass, at least at that point, you will know where the problem children are in the Senate. And I just don't see how we do well in the next elections after complaining about Obamacare, raising all the challenges with Obamacare that are all real, all true. We've worked on replacements for a very long time. We've done a discredit to ourselves in terms of how good the healthcare plan actually is. The mainstream media, all they'll talk about are cuts to Medicaid. And what I say is, well, come to my district where half the people are on Medicaid, which means if you have a card, but you have no health care. You're essentially going to the emergency room. If people have a serious problem in my district and you're on Medicaid, you have to go to UCLA. Nothing wrong with UCLA, no problem coming here to Los Angeles in the LA area. Or you have to go over to Stanford, and you have to go to the emergency rooms because there are very few specialists in my part of California. So don't lecture me about that I'm going to cut Medicaid. I don't want my constituents on Medicaid. I want my constituents to be able to get the same benefits, whether you work at Facebook or Google or one of the firms here in Orange County, where we essentially, all of us, give a tax credit to the company that offers that. So why should it be that a sole proprietor, a guy out there working hard, making $40,000 a year, driving truck in my district, and maybe wife works part-time at McDonald's, why should those people not get the same tax credit? Amen. They should. And I'll just say one more thing that doesn't often get a lot of coverage, because they'll bring up children. And they'll say that, well, these kids, that maybe they're in a broken home, or maybe their children here where their parents are not illegal, or maybe their parents aren't even here anymore. How are those kids going to be able to, the parents don't speak English. How are they going to know how to go use these credits? Because the hospitals and the doctors will admit that the credit that we're giving will be enough to actually get health care for these, that kids will be able to go buy health care with the amount that we're going to provide for them. And this is astounding, and it's astounding that the mainstream media has never picked up on this. We have major players in the healthcare industry who have said to me numerous times, well, how are these kids, or how these people are going to get these credits? They don't have an education. A lot of them don't speak English. How are they going to be able to figure out how to go use this? It shocks me. Wait a second. Because you don't have an education and because you don't speak English very well, means that you're too stupid to be able to figure out that the government's giving you a credit in your pocket to go buy health care? This is what the mainstream media and the Democratic Party, this is the nonsense that they're feeding the American people. Now, we have to do a better job selling it. I don't think the American people, probably a lot of you in this room, didn't know what we were actually trying to provide until tonight when I shared it with you. So we need the president out there leading on this, and we need the senators out there leading on this, and of course the members of the House. But part of that also means that we have to stop chasing Russian ghosts around in the closet and actually get to real work.
Absolutely. I wanted to talk about some of the great work you're doing on the Ways and Means Committee. You recently introduced the American Business Competitiveness Act, H.R. 4377. Tell us a little bit about that and why that's going to be important to getting our economy jump-started.
Well, what we're going to have to do in this country, whether we like it or not, there's a lot of complaints right now about what we're trying to do in the House of Representatives. But every major country in the world border adjusts. Now, there's different types of how you can border adjust, but if you've been to Europe, a lot of these countries have VATs. Now, look, I don't want to go to a VAT, all right? But there are other ways we can border adjust. So right now we're in an exclusive category of people who don't border adjust that includes great places like, well, North Korea, Yemen, and a couple other nice hot pockets of the world that don't border adjust. So we're going to have to move to border adjustment. That's going to be the real challenge, is getting to that point to where, how do we put in a simplified system so that what the House is proposing is doing away with accrual accounting, doing away with cash accounting, and putting all business activity, no matter how you're formed, under a cash flow system, where if you're a C Corp, you pay a 20% rate. If you're a sole proprietor or any other organized business, you pay a 25% rate. But everything would be expensed. So anything you buy would be expensed in that year. That's why it's called a cash flow system. And that's what we're working on. And that's what we're hoping to deliver to the American people. But there's a lot of education that has to be done in that front.
Great. The federal government seems to get into everything in everybody's business. And one of the things that Attorney General Laxalt talked about was returning us to federalism, where the states actually can control things. We had a big drought here in California, but before the drought ever happened, the Central Valley was being denied the water necessary to be the breadbasket of the world. What can you do to help get the federal government out of water policy that's actually killing our farms and hurting Southern California?
Well, the first thing I'll say is about this whole movement of federalism, and you had, surprisingly, for the first time, I actually heard California, the legislature started to talk about states' rights. Remember, they talked about being able to secede from the union. And the first thing I raised my hand and said, okay, look, if you guys go ahead and secede, I think we can do it for the betterment of America to just drop off California out of the United States, but I want to be the ambassador to California if I can from the United States. Of course, that's a joke, guys. I'm not really supporting secession, all right? LA Times, don't report that. If you look at what's happened here in this state, and what the people in my district have had to handle, the people in the San Joaquin Valley. So, we're considered as drive-through area, like, this place where the stinky cows are and just people, drive through it. And of course, the media always, makes fun of anybody that lives there, and I find it quite interesting because they don't complain about the food that we provide to them. Mm-hmm. But, we've had hundreds of thousands of acres that have been left fallow. There's a lot of reasons for that, but it's primarily not because of drought, not because of global warming or climate change. It's because of one reason, and one reason only. The water infrastructure that our forefathers in this state built has largely been turned off for the better part of a decade. This is why you guys, even here in Orange County and Los Angeles, you couldn't water your lawns last year. It wasn't because of drought. It was because pumps were not running to move that water that was in the delta like they used to run when they were first created. So we're doing this all to protect the delta smelt. Perhaps some of you have seen this. It's a little bait fish. And just this year alone, the amount of water that will go out by the Golden Gate Bridge is enough water to meet our shortfall. I want to get this number right because I think it grows every day as water continues to be flushed out to the ocean because we're not storing it, not capturing it, not moving it. I believe it's 15 years as we sit here today. Wow. We've lost 15 years worth of water that would meet the entire state's shortfall just since January. That's how crazy this state has become. And it's a combination of the state protecting non-native species like bass that aren't even from the state, and the federal government with the Endangered Species Act protecting smelt, which our governor and our 2 senators have weighed in on behalf of not farmers, not people like you that need water. They weighed in on behalf of smelt.
Amazing.
So the House of Representatives, we've passed numerous times legislation that would allow us to move that water all over the state, like it used to happen. But unfortunately, we haven't got any support from our state senators or our governor.
Congressman, to bring it back to California a little bit, we heard Carl DeMaio talk about the recall of Josh Newman because of the car tax. Our 2/3 legislature has added insult to injury by 12 cents a gallon on gasoline and 20 cents a gallon on diesel starting in November, and it's $75 to $175 in vehicle license fees starting in January, hurting the most average Californian because those who can afford it, it's not going to bother them, but it's hundreds of dollars a year to a middle-class family. What suggestions do you have for us after we recall Josh Newman?
Well, first of all, recall the offenders of this. Second of all, I think it's absolutely necessary that we get an initiative on the ballot. We have to get that done. And look, who does this hurt the worst? It hurts the people in my area, in rural parts of California where you have to drive farther to work. Now, it's quite nice of the state and all of you to fund this high-speed train that you're giving us. Now, they call it the high-speed rail to nowhere. Now, a lot of you guys think because where we live is nowhere, but it actually does go to nowhere because it starts north of Fresno and it ends before you get to Bakersfield. So, with no train, by the way, for the price. So that's the first leg of this thing. So I don't even know if you're going to take our water away and you're going to tax our cars so much that you're going to force us to get to the high-speed rail, where are you going to get dropped off at? You're going to jump on the train that doesn't exist, and you're going to get dropped off in the middle of fields that don't have water. So the bottom line is you can't make this stuff up, how crazy this state's become. And we need help from people like you here in Orange County and all of your representatives here. And this is why it's so important to keep this party strong here, because the country's becoming very divided. What you see is if you're in a big city, you're becoming more and more Democratic. If you're in a rural area, you're becoming more and more Republican. And what you have here in Orange County is one of those areas that is basically a big city, even though I know you're a lot of separate cities, but it's so critical for us to win here and keep winning here. And it's going to be up to folks like you that are going to be able to deliver the vote to pass the initiatives that we need to get some common sense back in the state.
Great. One last question, because I think it's so critical to our republic. We've heard a little bit tonight in your bio about your experience growing up in the Central Valley, your experience in the private sector at a young age. What has that experience brought for you to the Congress compared to, say, some of your colleagues on the other side of the aisle that have been permanently government employees, staff going on to being legislators and others? Because I think it's instructive for all of us what we need to have as our representatives.
Well, I think what the biggest concern I see long term for our party, for the Republican Party, is that the Democratic Party, especially like here in California, they have a permanent cash machine, right? So the public employee unions, whether it's a shadow party that continue to fund efforts that you see all over the state, or whether it is directly funding the candidates, and then you take the environmental extremist groups on top of that, it's going to be very, very difficult, I think, for how do we, as Republicans who rely on people like yourselves, who are entrepreneurs, people in business, people that work for small business, how do we, we all have to compete against ourselves because it's our tax dollars that are going to the public employee unions that I'm not against public employees, but the public employees are mandated to take money out of their paycheck that goes into not the Republicans' coffers, the Democratic coffers. And so this is going to be really the fight, I think, of the next decade for our party, is to see nationwide, is to make sure that what happened in California doesn't happen to the rest of the country. And that starts with people like you tonight and people here in Orange County, because we have to fight against the tyranny that's being put on not only our state, but all over the United States. Thank you all very much for having me tonight.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, what a fabulous evening it's been. Please give Congressman Devin Nunes a great round of applause. He is fighting the fight for us in Washington. Let's make sure we're there for him. You know, tonight we go on in hope and optimism. We take on the challenges of our targeted seats with the knowledge that our cause of liberty is righteous, and it's a cause that's going to bring this state back from bankruptcy, and the cause that will truly make America great again.